In the heart-stirring style of Rick Warren opening speech introduction, Rick Warren style, there are moments in life when the tears don't stop falling, when the silence of heaven feels deafening. When you're doing everything right, and still everything is going wrong. Have you ever whispered in the dark, "God, where are you?" Have you ever been so broken that words failed you, yet your soul cried out for answers? If you're in that place today, you're not alone. You've been faithful, you've prayed, you've waited, and yet the doors stayed shut. The healing didn't come, the breakthrough never arrived, at least not the way you expected. But hear me clearly, just because it doesn't make sense right now, doesn't mean God isn't working. You see, faith is not tested in the sunshine, it's proven in the storm. God never promised we'd understand everything, but He did promise we would never walk alone. This message is for the hurting, for the weary, for the ones hanging on by a thread. It's not just a sermon, it's a lifeline, a call to anchor your soul not in what you see, but in who He is. Because when life makes no sense, God still makes a way. When your world is shaking, His plan is still unshakable. So lean in, friend, wipe your tears, lift your head, because the God who sees is the God who saves, and today He's whispering to your heart, trust me, even now, even here, even in this. There are moments in life when it feels like heaven has gone quiet. You pray with all your heart, cry out through the tears, and still nothing. No sign, no answer, no whisper in the wind, just silence, deafening, consuming silence, and in those moments it's easy to wonder if God has turned His face away. If maybe, somehow, your prayers got lost in the noise of this world. You begin to question if He's still listening, or worse, if He's still there. But here is the truth your soul must cling to. God's silence is not His absence. Just because you don't hear Him doesn't mean He isn't near. Just because you can't feel Him doesn't mean He's not working. Sometimes the teacher is quiet during the test, not because they've left the room, but because they're watching you apply what you've already learned. The silence of God isn't abandonment, it's often preparation. There are seasons when God hides Himself, not to punish you, but to develop something deeper within you. In those quiet valleys, when answers don't come, when the pain doesn't lift, when the night feels never-ending, that's when trust is forged. That's where faith matures. Because it's one thing to believe in God when blessings are flowing, but it's another thing entirely to believe when the heavens are silent and your heart is breaking. That kind of faith, the faith that keeps walking when it can't see the road, that's the kind of faith that pleases God. Think about Job, a righteous man, a man who feared God and turned away from evil, yet in a single day he lost everything, his children, his wealth, his health, and as he sat in ashes, scraping his wounds, his friends accused him, his wife gave up hope, and even God seemed silent. But Job didn't curse God. He didn't walk away. He didn't stop believing. He said, "Though He slay me, yet will I trust Him." That's a declaration that only comes from someone who knows that God's silence is not His absence. Even Jesus, hanging on the cross, cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" In that moment of ultimate sacrifice, when the weight of sin pressed down and the sky turned black, He felt the silence. He bore the silence, but even then, God was not absent. His plan was unfolding in that very stillness. Redemption was being written in what looked like abandonment. Sometimes God is closest when He feels farthest. Like the wind, you can't see it, but you know it's moving, you feel its effects, and though God may be invisible in the moment, His presence leaves traces. That person who calls just when you're breaking, that verse that jumps off the page like it was written just for you, that moment of peace in the middle of the storm you thought would destroy you. These are the fingerprints of God, reminding you He's still there. Our problem is that we want explanations when God wants trust. We think understanding will bring peace, but peace doesn't come from answers. It comes from presence, His presence, and even if He's silent, He is still Emmanuel, God with us. with you in the waiting, with you in the hurting, with you in the silence. So don't confuse silence for abandonment. Don't assume that because the answer hasn't come, God isn't working. Seeds grow in silence. Babies are formed in the quiet darkness of the womb, diamonds are forged in unseen pressure, and God is shaping you in this season, not despite the silence, but through it. His silence is not a sign of his neglect, but often a signal of his nearness. He's still holding you, still watching over you, still writing your story, even if the page feels blank right now. There comes a time in every believer's life when logic fails, when reason reaches its limit, and when everything you've built your confidence on starts to unravel. It's in those moments that we realize something vital. Faith doesn't live in clarity, it lives in uncertainty. Faith doesn't need all the answers, it chooses to trust even when there are none. That's why we must remember this truth. Faith begins where understanding ends. You can't walk by faith and expect to understand everything. That's not how trust works. If you can figure it all out, calculate the outcome, and map the entire journey, then it's no longer faith, it's just planning. But God never called us to walk by sight. He called us to walk by faith, and that means moving even when the path ahead is foggy. It means saying yes when you don't have all the details. It means believing when nothing around you makes sense. The human mind craves clarity. We want reasons. We want God to explain himself, to give us a blueprint before we take the first step. But God often gives us just enough light for the next step, not the whole staircase. He's more interested in growing your trust than in satisfying your curiosity, because real faith doesn't demand to know. It simply says, God, I trust you anyway. Abraham didn't understand why God asked him to leave everything familiar and go to a land I will show you. He didn't get a map or a timeline, just a command and a promise, and yet he went, he believed. That's why Scripture says it was credited to him as righteousness. Abraham's faith started where his understanding ended. He trusted the character of God even when the details didn't make sense. Noah didn't understand why he had to build a boat when there was no sign of rain. Moses didn't understand how he could lead an entire nation out of slavery when he couldn't even speak clearly. Mary didn't understand how she, a virgin, could carry the Son of God. Over and over, God has called people to move before they understand. Because understanding is not a prerequisite for obedience, trust is. Sometimes God withholds understanding because he knows we would use it to avoid depending on him. He knows that if we could predict every outcome, we would stop listening for his voice. We would start relying on our own strength, our own wisdom. But God desires relationship, not routine. He wants us to lean on him, not just his answers. There's a sacred power in being able to say, God, I don't get it, but I trust you. That's the kind of faith that makes demons tremble. That's the kind of trust that moves mountains, opens prison doors, and silences fear. When you reach the end of your understanding and choose to stand anyway, to worship anyway, to obey anyway, something shifts. That's where miracles are born. It's okay to have questions. It's okay to wrestle with the unknown, but don't let the absence of answers rob you of your confidence in God's heart. His ways are higher. His thoughts are deeper. What feels like confusion to you may be clarity in his eternal plan. What feels like a detour may actually be divine direction. And just because you don't understand it now doesn't mean it's not God. God sees the whole picture. You only see a frame. He knows the end from the beginning, and while your mind may be crying out for answers, your spirit must rise up and declare, even here, even now, even in this, I choose faith, because where understanding ends, that's where the miracle of trust begins. There's a kind of waiting that feels like it's breaking you. You pray, you fast, you serve, you stay faithful, and yet nothing changes. Days turn into weeks, weeks into years, and still No breakthrough, no open doors, no healing, no sign that God has even moved an inch. And the longer you wait, the louder the lies become. Maybe God forgot about you. Maybe he changed his mind. Maybe your faith just isn't strong enough. But none of that is true. Because here's a promise you can stand on. Delay is not denial. God's timing is perfect. God is never in a rush. He's not bound by our calendars or pressured by our deadlines. His ways are eternal, and his timing is precise. What feels like a delay to us is often divine preparation. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't. God is not ignoring you. He's aligning everything for the right moment. We see the moment. We feel the urgency. But God sees the whole story. He knows what needs to happen in you before he can release what he wants to give to you. Sometimes he delays the blessing so that you're strong enough to carry it when it comes. Other times, he's working behind the scenes, orchestrating people, places, and events to line up exactly as they should. But make no mistake, he is always working. Think of Joseph, thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused, imprisoned for years. It looked like delay after delay, setback after setback, but in truth, every part of his journey was leading him to the palace. If Joseph had been promoted too early, he wouldn't have been ready. If he had skipped the pain, he would have missed the preparation. What looked like delay was actually divine timing, and when God was ready, suddenly, Joseph was elevated in a single day. God doesn't waste time, even when it feels wasted to us. David was anointed king as a teenager, but he didn't take the throne until years later. Why? Because the crown required more than oil on his head. It required character in his heart. During the delay, God was shaping him in caves, testing him in obscurity, refining his dependence on the shepherd rather than the throne. We often cry out for the destination, but God is far more invested in the transformation. His delay isn't to torture you, it's to teach you, to deepen your roots, to strengthen your faith, to prepare you for what he's preparing for you. And here's the hard truth. Sometimes, if he gave it to you now, it would crush you. Sometimes the delay is his mercy in disguise. Sometimes he's not withholding the promise. He's protecting you from arriving unprepared. Waiting doesn't mean wasting. In fact, some of the most powerful things God does in your life happen in the waiting room. He teaches you how to rely on him, not the outcome. He teaches you how to worship without conditions, how to trust without timelines. And that kind of faith, the kind that endures delay without giving up, is a faith that heaven honors. If you're in that place right now, where everything seems paused, where nothing is moving, and your heart is weary, don't lose hope. The delay is not the end of the story. God is still on schedule. Your life is not behind. Your purpose is not lost. The timing of heaven is never early, never late. It's always right on time. Pain has a way of making us question everything. It rattles the foundations we thought were unshakable. It steals our breath, interrupts our plans, and leaves us wondering why a good God would allow such brokenness. In the middle of suffering, it's natural to cry out, "What's the point of this?" But the truth that carries us through is this: pain has a purpose in God's plan. Nothing you've walked through is random. Not a single tear, not a single heartbreak, not one dark night has been wasted. God is a redeemer, and that means he takes what the enemy meant for evil and turns it into something good. That doesn't mean he caused the pain, but it does mean he's powerful enough to use it. Some of the deepest growth comes from the deepest wounds. We don't grow in comfort, we grow in pressure. In the soil of suffering, God plants seeds of strength. In the fire of trials, he forges endurance. In the broken places, he builds compassion and character. And what feels like it's breaking you may actually be shaping you into something stronger than you ever imagined. God never promised us a life without pain. In fact, Jesus said, "In this world you will have trouble." But he didn't stop there. He also said, "Take heart, for I have overcome the world." He never said the path would be easy, but he did promise to walk it with us, and to use everything, even our pain, for his glory and our good. Look at the cross, the greatest pain the world has ever known. The Son of God, tortured and crucified, was the very thing that brought salvation to humanity. The pain was real, the suffering was brutal, but the purpose was eternal. And if God could bring resurrection through that kind of agony, imagine what he can do with your brokenness. Sometimes pain reveals what comfort hides. It strips away our self-sufficiency. It makes us lean into God like never before. It refines our focus, awakens our hunger, and forces us to reach for the one who holds all things together. Pain removes the illusion of control and reminds us that our hope can't be in this world. It has to be in something deeper, eternal, and unshakable. And there's something else pain does. It makes you more useful to others. The very thing you're crying about today may become the thing God uses tomorrow to bring healing to someone else. That loss, that scar, that chapter you never wanted to live through, it may be the bridge someone else needs to cross over into hope. God comforts you not just for your sake, but so you can comfort others with the same comfort you received. The process is painful, but the outcome is powerful. You may feel like you're being crushed, but what's really happening is that the oil is being pressed out. The anointing, the depth, the fire, the calling. Every crushing has a purpose. Every breaking has a blueprint. God doesn't allow suffering to destroy you. He allows it to define you, refine you, and prepare you. You may not see the purpose now. You may not understand how anything good could come from this moment. But just because you can't see the purpose doesn't mean it isn't there. A seed buried in the ground doesn't look like much, but give it time and it breaks through the soil into something beautiful. That's how God works with your pain. Trust doesn't always come easily, especially when life is falling apart. When the report is bad, when the job is gone, when the people you counted on walk away, when your heart is shattered and your hands are empty. That's when trusting God feels the hardest, and yet that's when it matters the most, because trust is obeying without having all the answers. God never asked us to understand everything. He asked us to trust him through anything. Faith isn't built on explanations. It's built on relationship, and sometimes God will withhold the why to strengthen the who. He may not tell you why you're walking through the fire, but he will remind you who is in the fire with you. Obedience doesn't require a full picture. It only requires a surrendered heart. When God asked Abraham to take Isaac to the mountain, he didn't explain how it would turn out. He didn't give Abraham the blueprint, just a simple instruction, go. And Abraham went. That's trust. That's obedience without details. That's saying, God, I don't understand, but I'll still follow you. Too often, we want clarity before commitment. We want God to show us step 7 before we take step 1. But that's not how trust works. Trust says, God, even if I can't see the end result, even if I don't know how this ends, I will still do what you asked. That kind of obedience moves heaven. That kind of trust invites miracles. When God told Noah to build an ark, it had never rained before. People laughed at him. Decades passed without a drop of rain, but Noah obeyed. He didn't wait for signs in the sky. He trusted the voice of God. When Joshua marched around Jericho, there was no logic in the strategy. Walls don't fall from footsteps, but Joshua didn't argue, he obeyed, and the walls did fall, not because it made sense, but because God said so. Obeying without answers is not weakness, it's spiritual maturity. It says, God, I trust your heart even when I can't trace your hand. It's believing that the one who called you is faithful even when the path is dark and the road is rough. It's choosing to worship in the waiting, to serve in the silence, to love when you don't feel loved back. This kind of obedience will stretch you, it will cost you. Sometimes it'll look like stepping out of the boat while the storm is still raging. Other times it'll feel like walking into a furnace with nothing but faith. But every time, without fail, God shows up. He honors obedience, even the trembling kind, even when your knees are shaking and your voice is cracking. Even when you're unsure and afraid, but still say yes. You don't need all the answers to take the next step. You just need to know the one who's leading you. He sees what you can't. He knows what you don't. And he's not asking for perfection, just surrender, just a heart that says, even without knowing, I'll still go where you lead. When you live like that, when obedience becomes your posture and trust becomes your reflex, God begins to move in ways you never imagined. Doors open, chains break, miracles unfold, not because you figured it all out, but because you trusted the one who already had it figured out from the beginning. There are moments in life when everything around you feels like chaos. Plans fall apart, people change, storms hit without warning, and the life you thought you understood suddenly feels foreign. It's in those moments when nothing makes sense that you need to hold on to this unshakable truth. God is working behind the scenes, even in the chaos. You may not see it, you may not feel it, but God has never stopped being in control. His hands are not tied by your circumstances. He's not pacing the floors of heaven, worried about what's happening in your life. He is sovereign, he is steady, and even when life feels like it's unraveling, he's weaving something beautiful behind the curtain of your understanding. God often does his best work in the unseen. While you're focused on the storm, he's calming things you don't even know are rising. While you're crying over what's lost, he's already setting up what's next. While you're praying for a door to open, he might be building the entire house behind the scenes. Just because you can't see movement doesn't mean there isn't momentum. Look at the story of Esther. Her life took a sudden turn. Taken from her home, placed in a palace, surrounded by politics and danger. There was no mention of God's name in that entire book, yet his fingerprints were everywhere. While she was just trying to survive, God was positioning her to save a nation. The chaos didn't cancel his plan, it fulfilled it. Think about Ruth, widowed, broken, and gleaning scraps in a foreign land. It didn't look like a divine setup, but it was. God was orchestrating every encounter, aligning her with Boaz, redeeming her story, and placing her directly into the lineage of Jesus, from famine to fullness. From heartbreak to heritage, that's what God does with chaos. And if you're walking through something that feels confusing or crushing right now, know this: just because it's messy doesn't mean it's meaningless. God isn't intimidated by disorder, he creates from it. Genesis tells us that in the beginning the earth was formless and empty, darkness covered the deep, but even there, in that raw, chaotic place, God was already moving, already speaking, already creating something glorious. So don't give up in the middle. Don't judge the story by the chapter you're in right now. What looks like chaos to you might be construction to God. He's building something eternal, and every piece, yes, even the painful ones, serve a purpose. He is setting things in place that you won't understand until you look back and realize he never left, never lost control, never stopped being God. You may not see how the pieces connect right now, but that doesn't mean they're random. You may not understand the delay, the detour, or the disaster, but one day you'll see that God was working through it all. He's not a God of confusion, he's a God of completion, and even in the chaos, he's carrying you toward his promise. Sometimes life feels like a mess of broken pieces, nothing fits, nothing is clear. You look around and wonder, where is God in all of this? The pain is too loud. The loss is too deep. The questions are too many, and yet, even when it seems like chaos is winning, there is one unshakable truth. God is working behind the scenes, even in the chaos. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean he's not doing it. Just because you don't feel movement doesn't mean he's not orchestrating it. God specializes in silent progress. While you're praying through the tears, he's aligning the answer. While you're walking through the storm, he's calming waves you don't even know are rising. He is not still, he's strategic. God sees the entire picture while you only hold one frame. He's the author and finisher, writing a story that includes both the mountaintops and the valleys. What feels like confusion now will one day be a page that makes perfect sense in the context of the whole book. He doesn't just show up at the ending, he's been present in every chapter, every sentence, every pause. Think about Ruth. She lost everything, her husband, her home, her stability. It looked like the end of her story, but while she gleaned in the fields, unnoticed and unimportant, God was arranging an encounter with Boaz. While she mourned her loss, God was setting her up for legacy. She couldn't see it, but heaven was moving, or Esther, just an orphaned girl raised in exile, but behind the scenes, God positioned her in a palace not for comfort, but for calling. When the chaos of genocide threatened her people, she was already in place to be the answer. What looked like random events were really divine arrangements. God was working long before the threat appeared. Your life is no different. He's been weaving together details you didn't even know were connected. That detour, it wasn't wasted. It protected you. That delay, it wasn't rejection. It was redirection. That closed door. It wasn't punishment, it was positioning. God's fingerprints are all over your story, even if you can't trace them yet. We tend to think God only moves in the spectacular, but more often He's in the subtle. In the background, in the ordinary moments that feel small but carry eternal weight. He's in the quiet decision to forgive, in the whispered prayer in the middle of the night, in the strength to get up one more time when quitting felt easier. These are the moments that shape destiny, quietly, powerfully, intentionally. God doesn't need your situation to make sense, to work a miracle. He doesn't need things to be in order to bring about His plan. He brings beauty from ashes, hope from despair, order from chaos. He's the God who speaks into nothing and creates everything, and He's doing the same in your life, right now. You may not feel it, and you may not see it. But you're not forgotten, you're not overlooked, God is not idle, He's building something beneath the surface, something holy, something beautiful, something worth the wait. The storm you're in is not a sign that He's absent. It's often the very environment where His power is revealed most clearly.